The few clothes she had taken with her on having to leave the cottage were rinsed through at night, when Anne quietly slipped down a ginnel to use someone's sandpipe at the back of the house. She was careful never to use the same one twice, for fear of being discovered. Anne carried her small carpet bag of clothes to school each day in an effort to keep up her education. It was one afternoon as she was leaving when Mrs. Mortimer called her back. "Anne, your skirt is torn, my dear. Are you able to repair it?" Shaking her head, Anne said quietly, "No, miss, I can't sew, and I have no needle or thread." Knowing the girl's circumstances, Mrs. Mortimer's heart went out to the youngster, trying to survive on the streets with nothing to her name. "Come with me," the teacher said, before leading Anne to another classroom. Here, a teacher was showing a handful of girls how to sew together the pieces of an apron. Anne was welcomed and settled in, with the tutor helping her to stitch the rent in her skirt. Anne attended that class every day for the remainder of her school years, becoming a proficient seamstress. At 15, Anne said goodbye to the teachers of the school who had taught her so much, to the cooks who had fed her for free out of the goodness of their hearts, and to the building which had sheltered her from all weathers during the daytime. For the past 2 years she had begged food and clothes from the market, slept in churches or doorways, and now it was time to find herself a job. Every day for weeks she trundled around the town looking for work, to no avail. No one was hiring, and so the begging of scraps of food continued. Then, one day, Anne had been extremely fortunate to find herself a job just at the point when she was so low she was tempted to turn herself in at the workhouse gates. She had been taken on at the Bell Inn as waitress, dishwasher, and cleaner-cum-dog's body in return for her meals and a room at the top of the premises, as well as receiving a small wage. Now Anne was 18 and stood face to face with her employer in the steamy kitchen. "I'm warning you for the last time, Gladys. Either you keep your husband in check or I will leave this place. Then where will you be?" Ann Felton's dark eyes blazed with fury. "What's he done now?" the other woman asked with a sigh. "You know full well that man cannot keep his hands to himself, and I'm sick to death of it." Pushing her raven-black hair off her face with her wet hand, Anne slammed a clean plate onto the draining board of the old brownstone sink. "I'll be having a word then," Gladys sighed again. "Sooner rather than later, I would suggest," Anne said, as she continued to wash the dishes. She watched her employer leave the room, dragging her feet as she went. Shaking her head, Anne knew her warning would cause yet another row between husband and wife, but this time she was adamant. If Len Pritchard touched her once more, she'd be off. Continuing with her task, she thought about the past 3 years working in the Bell Inn in the little town of Wednesbury, the town in the heart of the industrial Black Country where she was born and raised. The sound of shouting disrupted her thoughts, and Anne closed her eyes and waited. After a moment, silence descended and she returned to washing the dishes. "I've had a word," Gladys Pritchard said as she shuffled into the kitchen once more. "I heard. Let's hope it does some good this time," Anne said sharply. Wiping her hands on a tea-cloth, Anne sat at the table and poured the tea Gladys had made. Watching the woman rolling out pastry for a pie, Anne allowed her thoughts to roam once again. The Pritchards had run the Bell Inn for many years, and despite drinking most of the profits, they somehow remained in business nevertheless. The place itself was ramshackle, with no money being spent to improve it. Gladys was a hard-faced woman with no time for anyone but herself. Len's frisky ways with women drove her to distraction at times, and she constantly berated him for it, but stuck by him regardless. Anne watched the woman as she worked. She must have been a beauty in her time, but hard work and a womanizing drunkard for a husband had taken its toll, and Gladys now looked a lot older than her years. Her fair hair was turning grey and wispy, and her eyes had lost all their lustre. She was overweight and round-shouldered. She had given up on looking smart now she spent her life in the kitchen of the inn. Both women groaned as Len bustled into the kitchen. "You've been getting me in trouble with the missus, or Annie?" he laughed. "I'm not your..."